Fantastic. And it's recording. Also fantastic.
Recording what we like to see.
Recording is what we like to see. Hello, hello, everyone that's coming on. I know we have quite a few people that were already waiting, so we're going to open this up a touch early just to make sure tech works. As you're joining, everyone, hopefully you're in the right class. This looks familiar, what you expected to see for the most part. Feel free to say hi in the chat, where you're from, anything you're excited about with Italy, planning your trip, all of that. And also, too, you might see another face on your screen. This is my friend Des. I'd like to introduce her. She's going to be helping out with moderation and just being an extra pair of eyes for me.
Hey, everybody.
So, yeah, so excited to do this today. Hello, Cindy, Jenny. Great. It's great to see everybody joining here. I know we had a lot of people register for this, so we'll see how many folks join us. Tony and Mike, oh, I'm seeing all the messages come in really quick. Hello, everybody. Hey, Ryan. Hello, hello. Oh, exciting. Very excited to have so many folks on here today. We're going to go through a lot of really good material. Oh, Wisconsin. Reno's here from Sorrento. Hey, Reno. Glad you could join. Duluth, fantastic. Okay, wonderful. Well, guys, please keep saying hi in the chat. I am going to get us started. I have so much content, too much content. I had to edit back a lot of stuff. So we are going to jump in and dive in and get started. First things first, please keep chatting in the chat. Also, I'll point out that there in a Zoom webinar, we have a Q&A section. There should be a Q&A box for you. As I go along this presentation, if you have questions that you want me to answer in the Q&A portion of this class, put them in the Q&A section, not the chat, just so we can separate those out. Des is there. If you forget and someone throws something in the chat, she'll be there to help make sure the right questions get in the chat. You can also, in the Q&A, you can upvote. So if you see questions in there you want me to answer, or hopefully we can answer as many as possible, please feel free to upvote those too. So awesome. Great. Well, I'm going to get us started here, and let me just get my screen. I am okay, great. Getting tech all figured out is always fun. So, okay, wonderful. So we are going to talk about first-timers trips to Italy. Hopefully some of you are planning your trip. I know a lot of people are planning to go in the next year or so. So first of all, we are going to, let me make sure this works. There we go. Topics that we are going to cover today are this list, and some more in depth than others. I did tailor it a bit for the questions that you submitted. And so we are going to kind of touch in on some things a little bit more at length than others, but trying to really give you a good framework for planning your trip, enjoying your first trip to Italy. So this is kind of the list. And yeah, I don't need to read through them. We'll go through each of these. And then I will note that I expect that most of my content will take the bulk of the hour because I have too much to say and I didn't want to cut more out. So in that event that I take up the full hour, what we'll do is go another 10 or 15 minutes post hour for the Q&A to answer some questions. If you need to drop out, keep in mind, I'm going to send this recording to you. You'll get the information on the slide, so you'll have all that info for you in early Monday, Tuesday, somewhere in that time frame. So just so you know, if you need to leave at any point early, you're going to get the recording for this and all the information that's on here. Okay, awesome. Let's dive in. First of all, you probably know who I am. I'm Jenna. Most of you know me from TikTok or social media or something like that. A little bit of my professional background, though, is I've spent the last 10 years in the tourism industry. I've been a tour director, both domestically in the United States and internationally. Before COVID, I was arranging and organizing private tours in Italy. Post-COVID, I've decided to kind of shift. And so now I do Italy travel consulting, resource development, these kinds of classes, which I really love. So that's kind of my background. I am studying Italian. I'm working my way up the fluency levels. So you have all my empathy if you're trying to learn Italian for your trip. I have been there, and it's always it's a marathon, not a sprint sometimes. But and then yeah, if just you guys probably know this, ItalyWithJenna.com. If you want to get in touch with me about anything else, that's my home site. Great. Also okay, we're going to dive in. Also I just have one quick announcement I was saving for this class. If you like these classes, if you like the info that I have to offer, I've been working on a very big project for the past couple months, and I have just soft launched it today, and you're getting the first announcement. I started a membership side to my site. What does that include, basically? Membership site is going to include classes like this, members only Q&As. You can ask me questions. We'll do lives like this. Topical classes too. I'm kind of thinking of like alternating. So I've got one planned for like Venice in December, but we'll adjust for like what members want. So if you want more of this, I was hoping to really be able to provide this to people on a broader scale. Also, I have on-demand courses that are available. I'm soft launching this week because I don't quite have the Italian one loaded, but it's going to be loaded this week. But the train system, basic traveler's Italian, the words you really need to know to have fun with the language, all this, blah, blah, blah. And then my resources and all of that. So I'm really working on developing that side of my site. This is just an example of the language class. So when I hard launch, it's going to be $65 a month, including all inclusive of everything. So as long as you're active, you get access to all of that. No added costs. For you, for those who are attending, or if you're watching the recording, thank you so much. If you want to join the membership this week, you can use the code SOFTLAUNCH50 for 50% off the first month. Okay. So if you want to come and join me this week as we get going, I do have a Q&A I was thinking of doing on Saturday, a week from today. So if it's just one or two people that want to join me, it'll be a great one-on-one, but I'm hoping a few people want to come and test it out, give me some feedback, let me know what would be more helpful. So you can use that. And this is just for you guys. So would love to see some of you over there, but just wanted to announce that. Okay, enough of that. That was just my very exciting thing that it's like when you work on a big project, it's like a big announcement. So thank you so much. Let's get into this class though, and talking about all of this information about your trip. So andiamo. First things first, I know planning trips like this can feel very overwhelming. So please remember, in all of this, you're going to Italy. Very exciting. Do not lose, at least not always lose that sense of excitement and joy. You're going to be in Italy regardless. And I know it's a lot of work to plan these trips. Trust me, I know. But I don't want you to forget about all the wonderful things you're going to see, the food you're going to eat, all of that. Now we'll get into some nitty gritty. All right. I got so many questions about 2025, Year of Jubilee, all of these things. So if you are planning on going in 2025, you probably know that it is the Year of Jubilee. And Rome is going to be experiencing a pretty big increase in tourism and people coming for this. If you don't know what Year of Jubilee is, it's a big celebration of the Catholic Church every 25 years. So they're expecting 3, 4, 5 times the amount of tourists in Rome. Now, what are the best ways to kind of help you be ready for that if you're including Rome in your 2025 trip? One thing to note is that there are things going on all year round. So sometimes people aren't sure about that. There are events going on all year round. You can look at the calendar, but just assume Rome will be busy all year round. Plan ahead your accommodation, your tours, even restaurants. I mean, just as much as you can plan ahead, and also to plan to do things if you can, maybe not during event weekends that they're holding things, but you might not have control over that. And then I would just kind of get your plans in order, get your tours in order, your tickets, anything you want to do. And then just, maybe if the city is feeling really busy, there's lots of neighborhoods that are kind of on the outskirts of Rome or just a little bit outside that you can kind of get out of the density if you happen to feel like it's too much for you. Lots of good options there. So do a little research, do a little planning for that. We could do a whole class on, probably not a whole class on Jubilee, but we could speak more to that. But just plan ahead's my big suggestion there. A couple things also for 2025. ETIAS, this is the travel authorization that the EU is looking to implement. They've kept postponing it, but this is something that if you're going post June, July, keep an eye on it because it won't be in effect the first part of the year. Could be in effect the later part of 2025, something you would need to do before you leave, ideally a couple weeks or a month before your trip. Then I do want to point out, UK is not my area of expertise, but they are starting their version of this travel authorization on January 8th. So even if you are transferring through Heathrow to get to Italy, or if you're including London or the UK in any of your travels, you'll want to apply for their travel authorization. Just want to put that on the radar for anyone that might apply to. Then 2026, if you're looking to go then, I know we had a few people doing that. The Olympics are happening in Milan and the Dolomites, Northern Italy, February 2026. You may want to go and enjoy it. You may want to avoid it, but just to have that also on your radar. Awesome. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about some fun stuff. Planning your trip. We're going to jump in here. So planning your trip to Italy, people go, how do I start? What do I do? There's a few key factors I think you can really kind of focus on. First of all, any logistical restrictions we have, travel length, budget, that sort of thing. That'll help kind of shape the outline skeleton of it. Factor in your travel style. Do you like to have a really more active, fuller itinerary? Do you like more margin time? That will also impact kind of where you go and how often you're moving. Then these things over here, research and listing musts and wants, I think people tend to not, I would encourage you to prioritize them more than I see most people do, because a lot of times people don't even know what they want to see or what they might want to experience in Italy. But when you think about going to Italy, what is it that you would really regret not doing if you went and came back and didn't get to do it? Gondola ride in Venice, seeing the Colosseum, what are those things that are musts? And then you can kind of start with those as building blocks. And then what are your want to do's? Like what are, ideally, I mean, I have to see the Colosseum, but I'd love to go into Tuscany, right? It's okay if we don't, but like, I'd really like to fit that in. But that can kind of really help structure how you're fitting in your trip altogether. So a lot more goes into itinerary planning than that, but hopefully that helps give you a little bit of basis of how you can start to pick apart your variables on those. Also, too, a few of my tips on planning your trip, if you haven't already started doing this. I would suggest either focusing on, for a first trip, focusing on the northern part of Italy or the southern part of Italy. A lot of times people try to do the whole like stretch, or they think they're going to do the whole stretch. And if you have a month or more, maybe, but I would really focus on one or the other for most people's trips, or specific regions. For example, Sicily, really, you could spend a week or two just in Sicily. So there are areas of Italy where if you just want to really be in an area, you certainly can. On that note, like I mentioned, people try to span the whole length and they don't realize how long Italy actually is. So for my US friends that are on here, Italy is essentially the length of like kind of from Oregon down to Mexico. It really is quite long. So if you can think about, oh, that actually, even with high-speed trains, that takes a long time. So that's why we really say focus north, focus south, or kind of pick some areas to really kind of cluster your travels a little bit more. Okay, and then this chart, you're going to get this. Remember, don't let this be overwhelming. I know it's a lot of content to see right away, but this chart is something I put together as just a general suggestion of how many nights should you spend in a certain destination. So most people for first trips, they're going to do something like Rome, Florence, and Venice. Now, to really get a nice sense, have time to see the sights, have time to have a little bit of downtime too, not too much, but a nice balance. This is my general suggestion. 3 to 5 nights for Rome, 3 to 5 for Florence, 2 to 4 for Venice. Maybe we do a day trip into Tuscany. Maybe we do, sometimes you can do a day trip into Cinque Terre. It's a little bit of a full day, but some people do it. But just to give you an idea, really, if you've got 10 to 14 days, that's your trip. So that would be something I'd really use this chart to kind of like at least base your trip off of if you're not sure where to start. And then you can build in, kind of build from there. One thing I want to note is down at the bottom here, you'll see I have kind of 3+ nights, 4+ nights, 5+ nights. Some of these regions and areas take a little more time to get to. They take a little more time to explore. Also, too, you'll notice I recommend for transportation, car rentals or private drivers for certain areas. So something to take into consideration too for your first trip if you just want to focus on train travel, or if we're going down to the Amalfi Coast, having a private driver is really going to make that experience a lot better, using the ferries for certain things as well. All right, so you're going to get this again. Remember, you're going to get this in the follow-up email. Okay, optimizing your time. So a few things you can do: open jaw flights, fly into Rome, fly out of Venice. That really helps if you can do that. Strategic routing. So like just map out what you're planning to do. Sometimes people backtrack unnecessarily. And if you can avoid that, that'll really help. Location of accommodations. We're going to get into this more in depth in a second here, but having a good location for where you're staying can really help you maximize your time. Even if you're spending maybe a little bit more on that accommodation, it can actually balance out, as you can imagine, with not having to take transportation in, you're maximizing your time, etc. Number 4, so I do consider day trips instead of moving. Keep in mind when you're planning your trip, the time it takes to pack your stuff, check out of your hotel, get your luggage to the train station or whatever, check back into the hotel, drop your luggage at the next destination. That takes up time. It takes up energy too. Sometimes people don't realize how much travel can be kind of wearying. And so something that if you can base a little bit longer in one area and do some of those day trips, that can be a really nice balance as well. Finally, transportation choices. I say this because, like, for example, we're going to talk about the trains in a second. There are regional trains that are cheaper, but they're going to take a lot longer. Or you could certainly make your way down to certain areas of Italy and with the public transportation system, but the amount of time that it's going to take you versus either hiring a driver or, renting a car, whatever it would be, might be more beneficial for you to invest in what seems like a more expensive transportation method, but really is going to help you actually get to enjoy the limited amount of time you have in Italy. Not that the trains aren't wonderful and seeing the countryside's wonderful, but we also want you to be in the destinations as much as you can. All right, when to book. This is a general guideline of when I would suggest looking at booking stuff, flights, hotels, tours, 3 months out. Official tickets, let me point out, if you want to book official tickets or official tours, a lot of times those do not get released until 30 days out, 60 days out, something like that. So for example, the Coliseum does not release their tickets until 30 days out. So if you wanted to get official tickets, which are cheaper, or tours, like the Vatican has official tours, but they don't release out as early. The second party, third party tour companies can book B2B tickets. So they can sell their tours because they know they'll be able to secure those tickets well in advance, right? So it's going to cost a little bit more, but there's the balance there. Train tickets, I'll speak more to this, but train tickets a month out for high-speed trains, regional trains, you can buy those same day. Restaurants, people ask, I had a lot of questions around do we need to book restaurants? Maybe in Rome this year. Maybe in Rome we make reservations for at least some dinners, right? There's always going to be food available, but if there's places you want to eat, I would book it, even if it's a couple days before you're going to eat there. Or sometimes you can even get reservations the day of. So that's something that if you want to dine somewhere, I'd really encourage that. Good places do fill up for dinner, and if you're going during high season, which May, June to September, October, I would at least put in some restaurant reservations for that as well. Okay, I'm going to quickly go over just destination overviews. If you haven't been to Italy, just to give you an orientation of the kind of the main highlights, as well as I got asked about kind of main sites to see. I'm not going to go into this super in depth. I just want to give you a broad overview of this. So we're in Rome. Generally speaking, we've got these areas here that I've circled. I'll talk about that in a second, but the Roma Termini train station is the main one here for orientation. Colosseum's down here, Vatican's over here. Rome's fairly spread out, takes a little bit of time to get around to these places. So the neighborhoods I have circled, generally speaking, are ones that I think are good for getting accommodation in, for staying in on the whole. My favorite is Trastevere. I like Monti as well. They have a little more character to them. They're a little less tourist dense, especially if you're kind of even on the outskirts of some of them. And then Testaccio is a little neighborhood that's off most of the tourist radar. And so it's a great neighborhood if you're looking for budget friendly, still fairly close to the city center, but it takes you a little bit longer to get there. But just to throw that on there too, as an option for you. But really, if you kind of stay in this area, it works out pretty well. You can get to a variety of places. To note, sorry, I meant to mention this, the city center, this is where Trevi Fountain is, the Pantheon, Piazza Navona, all of that. So that's what I'm talking about with city center. A lot of people stay around that area. I'm not going to go over all of this, but just for your reference, you'll have a list of top sites for first-time visitors. This is what I would recommend, kind of in order of importance, I would say, for first-time visitors. It's not exhaustive. There's plenty of other things you can do and see in Rome, for example. But just to give you a kind of an orientation to that, as well as day trip ideas, look into these, do some research if you want to include any of those. And then down at the bottom here, I've included a few for each of these destinations I go through. I've got a few of my little ooh, this is one thing I really like to do when I'm in Rome or when I'm in Venice. So again, you'll have this information. You can look that stuff up later. But just to give you, I got a lot of questions about what do I see in these cities? So I wanted to include that for you as well. Florence is much smaller, much more walkable on the whole. So the main central train station for Florence comes in right here. It's called Santa Maria Novella, or Firenze SMN. But overall, I mean, with luggage, you might not want to walk, but on the whole, very walkable to from the train station or in the city center here. General circled area is a great place to stay, keeps you within distance, easy distance of stuff, even a little bit outside of it's fine. But the main Duomo's right here, Statue of David, Ponte Vecchio's down here. So really very convenient. Florence is much smaller. My favorite areas, by the way, I don't have this noted, I like staying over by Santa Croce over here. I like this neighborhood a lot, or Santo Spirito across the river over here is a nice area as well. And again, you're going to get this list of things in Florence to do, day trip ideas by train or day trip ideas by car, and kind of some little gems that I like to do as well. All right, this is Tuscany, and this is just to show you in my very fun, sketchy red marks, the general train route in Tuscany. I want to emphasize that a lot of times people think it's easy to get around Tuscany with public transportation. If you're going to Lucca, to Pisa, to Siena, yes. But when people think Tuscany, I think a lot of times they're thinking countryside and Chianti and Montepulciano, and these really necessitate a car or some kind of organized tour. You need that kind of transportation. So driving a car in this area overall is very easy if you want to do that, but a lot of people like to do day trips with an organized tour or a private driver into Chianti or down to San Gimignano, Volterra, those areas. So I just wanted to point that out. Look at this when you're thinking about adding in Tuscany, look at what you want to, if you don't want to rent a car, if you want to use the train system, there are plenty of destinations you can access with the train. But if you want to get into the countryside, which I personally recommend, I would either do a car rental or a tour or something like that. So you can actually go into like the beauty of the country, like the countryside. I did just spend 3 weeks in Tuscany, so I'm a little bit biased, but I'm biased towards all these places. Okay, great. Venice. And I'm sorry, I know I'm going a little bit fast. I'll try to slow down a little bit too, but I want to make sure to get this information to you. So Venice, generally speaking, we've got the main St. Mark's Basilica area here, Doge Palace, lots of hotels and things along there. And then also, I didn't point this out, train station comes in right there, Venezia Santa Lucia. My favorite areas, Cannaregio, a little bit more local, a little bit more chill, still very walkable on the whole. Keep in mind, when you're coming into Venice and you come in by train, or if you come in by bus or by car, which will drop you off right here, the only way you're getting around Venice is by foot or by boat. So there's no car taxis to take you to your hotel. You have to either walk it, or you need to arrange for a private water taxi or take the public water boats, essentially. So Venice on the whole is very easy to navigate if we don't have mobility issues, but that's something to take into consideration when you're planning your accommodation, if there is that concern or anything like that. But yeah, Cannaregio is one of my faves, but really if you kind of stay anywhere in this general circle, it'll be pretty walkable for you. And I do recommend for first timers staying in Venice proper. I know there are some hotels, like the Marriott has like their own island a little ways away. And if you have points, you want to stay there, do that. I don't recommend it. If it's your first time in Venice, stay in Venice, because the magic of Venice is, in my opinion, the evening. Like when all the day trippers leave and you've got the city a lot quieter and you go stroll St. Mark's Square when it's like just a lot. It's a different experience. So there's my suggestion. And I'll send you these two top sites, day trip ideas, some of my faves. All right, and then briefly, I'm going to touch on Naples and the Amalfi Coast. This location in particular requires the most logistical planning and is the hardest to get around public transportation wise compared to the rest of the destinations and a lot of the rest of Italy. Easy to get to Naples by high-speed train, but after that, it's only local run trains that take you down to Sorrento. Not ideal, not something I recommend if you don't have to do that, but it does exist, just so you know. And there are bus service that will take you along the Amalfi Coast. Not something I recommend, but it does exist. So Sorrento's a really good base if you want to do a variety of things around the Amalfi Coast. Go to Capri, go to Pompeii, go see the Amalfi Coast. Other places you could base, a lot of people like to base in Positano or Amalfi, those areas. Keep in mind, beautiful towns. Oh my gosh, so stunning. Keep in mind, lots and lots of stairs. Just like plan your accommodation well. Make sure you know just make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, because Sorrento alternatively is much flatter. Whereas once you get to the coast itself, it's like cliffs, like diving into the sea, which is why it's so beautiful. But does take a little bit more planning logistically. I do recommend if you want to do like touring along the coastline, private driver is an ideal situation. Boat tour to see it by the boat, either private or shared boat tour, is ideal as well. That's how I would get around. This part I would really plan. Sorrento to Capri, lots of ferries do that. I did have a couple people ask about Ischia, which really is easiest to access from Naples. So if you were up by Naples, that's an easier island. Ischia is a lot quieter island on the whole compared to Capri, and a lot bigger. Capri's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. Like you're not going to go wrong, but some people did ask about that. So you certainly could decide if you wanted to go to Ischia, and spend a little more time there. But we can do, I think I made a TikTok about this. I'm working on a whole class on this region, with my dear friend Reno, so who might still be in the call here, but we'll go more in depth on how you can get around and things to do and all of that. Okay. And then I'll send you the list of all the things that I think are worth doing for first timers. All right. Okay, I'm gonna take a breath. All right, let's jump into accommodation. Now that we've talked about kind of where to stay, where I would recommend staying in these areas. Airbnb versus hotel. Generally speaking, I would suggest hotels for first timers staying in Italy. There's a lot of reasons for that. The biggest one being you've got this front desk support or concierge, standard expectations. You know what you're getting yourself into. You can check in, drop your luggage, all of that. Now, the cons would be cost. And I know a lot of people travel with like families or like kind of unique group sizes. And so that can be a potential con because you have to get multiple rooms versus maybe an Airbnb that would have more flexibility there. So best, I think certainly like if I'm just staying somewhere for a night, I'm staying in a hotel. First time travelers, I think hotels are great for full service experiences as well. And then Airbnbs, the pros, affordability can be one for sure. More spacious, they have washers. Please note, dryers are not a thing really in Italy unless you go to a professional laundry service. So do not expect a dryer in your Airbnb, but they will have washers if they list them. And then you get to line dry. So, plan that accordingly. Kitchens are really convenient especially if you're there for a few days. And I will say one thing I do with Airbnbs when I do look, I really vet for the hosts. I try to stay in places that are owned by local people that they're really given a lot of great reviews about. So those are the pros and some of the big pros in my opinion. You could have the lack of on-site support. If you need a taxi, you don't have someone that can just call it up for you. Arranging check-in sometimes can be a hassle. Luggage storage is not a given. So I think this is better for if you're familiar with Airbnb, you're staying somewhere a longer period of time, you have kind of a non-standard group size, a big family or a bunch of friends or something like that, or solo travelers, that sort of thing. That can be a nice feature. And to note other types of accommodation you can look into, agriturismos, villas, castles, palazzos, convents and monasteries, you can look into those as well. Variety of different levels of accommodation. Agriturismos are really popular in the countryside because you can go stay essentially on a farm, which is what I did in Tuscany. I stayed on a bee farm. It was wonderful. And there was a collie dog named Pepe, and anyway, I won't go into that. It was wonderful. So you can look into those. What to expect. This I think is really helpful to just little things to know. They're going to have hair dryers in pretty much all accommodation, shampoo, body wash, hangers, safety deposit boxes. What's not commonly supplied, conditioner, if you need that, washcloths, my Americans. Washcloths are not a thing in Italy, so if you want one, bring one. Irons or steamers, you might need to ask the front desk if you need one of those if you don't see one. And then refrigerators in hotels, not super common. Takeaway is not super common in Italy compared to the United States, at least. Few random tips. I think I'll let you kind of peruse more of these later, but the one that I want to point out, it is normal for them to ask you for passports to copy them. That's a legal requirement. Any accommodation has to do. There are city taxes that you have to pay on site. That's sometimes something you have to pay in cash. And then elevators, if you need an elevator, check because a lot of these buildings are older and so that's not confirmed. And then the other things I want to touch on here, electricity is very expensive. And so things you'll notice is that if you have like one of those key cards in the hotel, you'll actually have to insert it sometimes into a slot to start your electricity for your room. Then when you leave for the day, you take it out. So a little tip on that is like just charge stuff overnight because it won't be charging during the day, right? Also means your air conditioning isn't running during the day, just to say that. Always check if you need air conditioning. It's not as strong. That's a whole nother, you've probably heard about that too. But if you're going during the summer, make sure your place has air conditioning if you're going somewhere that's going to be hot, which is most of Italy. Heating, some heating, I will say, it's not always turned on until certain dates. And so just something to keep in mind that we're going to talk about packing and that sort of thing, but layers really come in handy for a variety of these situations. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. Quickly going to touch on bathrooms. If you haven't, if you're like, I have a lot of friends that are American, they haven't traveled before. They're like, what is the bidet? We don't know what a bidet is. I wanted to show you. This is an actual photo of one of my Airbnbs. Toilet here. This is a bidet. It is not a faucet. It is not a wash sink. Well, it's a wash sink, but for you, after you use the toilet, you can Google how to do that if you want. I'm not going to go into any more explanation. But you'll be given a separate bidet towel, and you're going to see these everywhere in accommodations. So that's what's going on there. And yeah, I just made a note. Sometimes there's a string by the shower. It's in a like emergency call string. I definitely did not find that out the awkward way one time. Okay. While we're on bathrooms, I'm going to touch on public bathrooms. They're not free. You might have heard this already, but they're not free. They usually cost 50 cents or €1. Don't expect toilet seats. Don't expect toilet paper. Usually, sometimes they have it, but just don't expect it. Also, too, sometimes flushing's a mystery. So sometimes it's a button on the wall, on the floor. It's a chain. It could be a variety of things. Sometimes sinks are actually foot pedal operated, which I love. I don't know why all sinks aren't foot pedal operated, but if you can't figure out how to turn the sink on, look down. And then just to note, it's very common to see a common washing sink and then like a men's like stall, a women's stall, and then a common washing sink. So just for kind of expectations that way. And what else? Flush app is convenient for finding public bathrooms. And then squatty potties, this is my little, like, don't worry, squatty potties aren't really a big thing anymore. You probably won't see them. That's where the hole in the floor where you have to squat. Very rarely, I have not seen one of those in years in Italy. They do exist, but they're thankfully getting updated on the whole. So, okay, done with accommodations, bathrooms, all of that. Transportation was a very big topic. So I'm going to give this a few minutes because I know a lot of people are like, how do I get around? What do I do? First of all, airport arrivals. I'm not going to go into this in depth, but what you can do is look at the airport you're arriving at, a variety of ways to get to your hotel. Best way, but most expensive, have a private driver show up. If you're really uncomfortable or like just feeling nervous about getting to Italy, you'll arrive and it'll be someone with Jenna Chaplin or Jenna, whatever your name is, and they'll take your luggage and walk you to the car and take you right to the hotel. That's the most convenient, most expensive. Otherwise, you've got taxi service for all these places. Trains are really like there's a direct train at Rome and in Milan. So those are really easy to use in my opinion. Buses and trams also exist. Florence has a nice tram from their airport to the train station. So look at the best way to do this is wherever you're flying into or flying out of, go to that airport's website, the official one, and they'll have how to get to and from the airport. So they'll list the variety of ways. Now let's jump into train travel because this is absolutely my favorite way to travel around Italy. And for first timers in particular, this is what I would recommend, generally speaking. Very easy and convenient. Don't worry about how kind of busy the map looks that I've got on this screen, but please note that this is kind of a general map of the network of trains in Italy. You can see how extensive it is. So if you're going to any of the main destinations, train travel most likely is going to be a very convenient way for you to get around. Okay, a few things about when to buy train tickets. Like I mentioned earlier, high-speed tickets, we want to buy just for pricing purposes, mostly 3 weeks out or more. Regional tickets, anytime. Now, if you're not sure, I'm just going, how do I explain that? If you're not sure if it's a high-speed train or regional train, usually the regional train says Regionale next to it. But usually if it's a slower train, cheaper train, that's a regional train. Like if you're going from Florence to Pisa, that's a regional train. If you're going from Rome to Florence, they'll run regional trains, but it'll take like 4 hours. And the high-speed one will take like an hour and a half, right? So you'll be able to see when you're looking. Now, how to buy tickets. These are the two main train companies in Italy. There are a lot of third-party train apps, Trainline, Omio, all of that. Personally, I do not recommend them. I know some people use them and like them. I prefer that people book directly with Trenitalia or directly with Italo, because if anything happens while you're traveling, these companies, their staff can help you directly. You do not need to go through any third-party customer service, anything. So that's my preference. You do what you want to do, but that would be my recommendation. Trenitalia runs the most extensive network because they're the state run. They do a great job on the whole. Italo, more selective network, only high-speed trains to kind of the bigger destinations. Both are great, worth price comparing for your dates and all of that if you want to. Sometimes Trenitalia is cheaper, sometimes Italo or schedules, but I would book directly with them on their website or their apps. Main train station names, I have a folder list on my website under the free resource list, but just make sure you're booking to and from the correct train stations that you want to be, just to note. So I had a client recently who was like, thankfully we were like, oh, we booked to the wrong one. Let's get that fixed. So just make sure you're looking at the right train stations. Quickly, validation. Do I need to validate my ticket? Basically, if you buy a digital ticket online, no, not anymore. You don't need to do anything. If it's a paper ticket for regional trains, you do. This is what the validation machine looks like. There's a black slot right here. You stick your paper ticket into, and usually to the left a little bit. You'll hear it stamp. You'll pull it out. You'll see that it's stamped, time, date, location. You're good to go. So you need to do that before you get on the train. Very quickly, how to read a departure board. I just wanted to give you a little just overview of this because this can be overwhelming for people too. So this is the departure board at Roma Termini, huge train station. Make sure we're looking at departures, first of all. Don't get overwhelmed with all the information that's on here. Look at your ticket. This is an example of a ticket I purchased from Roma Termini to Roma Trastevere, which is another train station in Rome. Right here, somewhere on your ticket, you're going to see that train number, just like a flight number. It's specific to that train. And so what you're going to look for is this column here is listing all of the train numbers. Now we can see here that 12512 is my train number, and there it is on the board. So now we can scroll over and see all the information for it. I want to point out that this column shows the destination. You'll notice that this destination does not say Roma Trastevere. It says Civitavecchia. Don't let that freak you out. This is the end destination of that train. So that train will make many stops on its way to Civitavecchia, which is at the sea. So it'll go from Rome to the coast. One of the stops is the one I'm going to get off on. This column here will scroll through all the stops it's going to make. But as long as you've got the right train number, you're good. Then the platform, about 15 minutes before your train is ready to depart, they'll list the platform there, and platform 25 is the one for my train in this situation. Once you see the platform, I would advise going to your platform just because usually there's not a ton of time. It's better to just get there and get on the train once you can. So that's how you can read that. And then finding your way around train stations. Lots of signage. Don't worry. Lots and lots. Most of the signs too are in English and Italian, unless you're in really small cities or towns. But like, for example, I know this is a little pixely, so my apologies, but this is showing the platform. So platform 1 to 2, 1 to 23, 24 to 29. So you're just following the directions, no problem. And then just quickly, luggage storage on the high-speed trains. You're going to have for bigger bags storage on the ends of the coaches, and then for kind of carry-on size or so, you can store them in the overhead or between seats there. If you're on regional trains, sometimes there's not great luggage storage. One advice you'll hear all the time, you've probably heard it a lot, is travel light. If you're doing a lot of train travel, traveling light will be your friend because there's not always a lot of space for big checked bags. Or you just get to stand awkwardly in like the middle between the two carriages, and I've seen plenty of people do that. Quickly, a few train tips. Recommend getting there 20 to 30 minutes beforehand to the station. Orient yourself. That should be a good amount of time. Take tickets of the QR codes just in case, like if you have digital tickets, just in case cell service goes out. It's just a little thing I do. When you're ready to get off the train, make sure when it comes to your stop, you're ready with your luggage to get off right away. They don't stop for very long at certain stations. So, and it's common that everyone will get off first, and then people wanting to get on will get on, and you don't want to get stuck in like cross traffic. So just be ready, watch for your station, make sure you're monitoring for that. To open the doors, if you don't use public transportation, this is a nice little key tip. The doors will close automatically, but they do not open automatically. There's going to be a button you push, or on older trains, there's like a lever sometimes. So just know you need to activate that door opening. And then strikes. This is a little tip. It's not guaranteed, but most train strikes happen on the weekends for like the national train system. There's actually a strike happening right now through tomorrow. I have a client in Italy right now. We're talking about, okay, there's strategies there that you can do, but basically if you have the flexibility to book your important train routes on a Monday through Thursday, that statistically will give you a little bit better chance of not catching a strike. No guarantees. I'm not making any guarantees here, but just so you know, it's kind of a little side tip. Briefly, car rentals here. I would recommend them if you're going to go into Tuscany, like I mentioned, Umbria, which is right next to Tuscany, Sicily, for example. Like using driving a car is not a big problem at all. But I would not advise them for any of city travel at all, or like I mentioned before, the Amalfi Coast, for many reasons. If you're going to rent a car, though, here are things, kind of a checklist of things for you. Get your international driver's permit. If you can't drive a manual, make sure you're renting an automatic from like an airport car rental or a big car rental business, essentially, because you want to make sure that you get that automatic. Purchase full coverage insurance. Please, 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 if you see this word ZTL zones and you plan on renting a car and you don't know what that means, I need you to look that up and do your research on that. The sign here is what a ZTL zone sign means. You are not allowed to drive into this zone. These are in the city centers, town centers. You get fined big time, and there's no grace. They're camera controlled. You need to make sure that you do not go into those zones. Speed cameras, toll roads, filling stations, just be aware of these things exist. Do a little research on that. The Waze app works really great in Italy, in my experience. And then I've got a link. You'll get some great driving articles on a blog post that I like that just give you the information. I've got a lot more content I'll make on it, but I don't have it ready to go. So I'm going to send you to some people that have got some great content. Local transport, buses, trams, ferries. So I don't have time to go into every city's like local transport, but I got so many questions. I'm like, how can I give you a go-to? So the best way, and this is a hidden gem for also your touring, sightseeing, all of that. If you go to the city or destination's official tourism website, they have so much information that is very beneficial and helpful. So just search, Rome official tourism website. Go there, you'll see all sorts of info, including all the local public transport, including the kinds of tourist cards that might make sense for you to bundle sites or bundled transport or something like that. So this is use these. I have these links. So once you get this, you can click on them, but it's easy enough to Google the official tourism websites. Okay, food and dining. This is one of my favorites. So first of all, please do not think about Italy as a unified country for anything, but especially for food. Think of it as, well, as it is, which is regional, is only unified in the 1800s as a country. This is like hyper regional areas of food, culture, history, customs, all of that. So keep that in mind as you're dining, as you're exploring, try out the local stuff that you can. Yeah, hyper regional food. Now I'm going to point out that there are bars, cafes, and enotecas. These are places to drink. Coffee is where you get bars are where you get coffee. Sometimes they're called cafeterias or something like cafes, something like that. But usually it's just got a big sign that says bar. That's your coffee spot. Also your aperitivo spot. Also your drink spot. Also your little snack spot. It kind of is an all-purpose place. But bars are key. Enotecas are wine bars. And then this is kind of our food category for sit-down dining, osterias, trattorias, restaurantes. So this is where we're actually going to go and dine. This is not an appropriate place to go and just get a drink. You don't want to, typically you want to go to a bar for that. These places we're going to go eat. And then if you're like either just wanting something quick or takeaway or affordable eats, look for things like fornos or tavola caldas, which are basically, this stands for hot table tavola calda. Forno means oven. We got pizza, we got hot dishes to take away. I've actually got some pictures I'll show you in a second. You get a sense of that. But so those are kind of a few different categories there. Coffee, I'll send this to you. You can review all the details on here, but basically espresso, cafe espresso is if you order coffee, it's cafe espresso in Italy. Cappuccino is also very common, which has milk in it. If you're a black coffee drinker, you're going to want to get a cafe americano, which is what my partner always gets because he's a black coffee drinker. So it's just cafe espresso and hot water. How to order, if you're going to get coffee, please know it's customary in Italy to drink coffee standing at their coffee bar. And so you can go in and just usually order from the barista. You'll stand there, they'll bring you your coffee, you'll drink it there, and then you'll go to the cash register to pay. If you want to sit at a table, usually there's table service and they'll have you. I always check with someone I'm like, hey, is it okay if I sit? And then they'll let me know if I need to order at the bar, but usually they have someone that comes and takes your order. And it'll cost a little bit more to sit and have a coffee at the table, but you can just sit and it's a very hang out. Like you can be leisurely about it. It's not like there's, you know what I mean? You can like really enjoy the time there. So that's just something that's important to know. And again, when you're ready to pay, you can go to the cash register and pay. And briefly, I had a few questions about aperitivo. Like, what is this? Aperitivo is essentially, it's a part of the culture in Italy, originated in the north, so a little bit more prominent there. But it's pre-dinner drink to like stimulate your appetite. Usually what happens is you'll order a drink. This is kind of after work. You'll get like an Aperol Spritz or Campari Spritz, which you see here. And that's like Prosecco and Campari and a little bit of soda water. And then it'll be served with nuts, chips, olives, maybe little panini, focaccia type things. That's included in the price of your drink. So this is kind of a part of depending on where you're going, you'll get different kinds of food, but it's a part of the general Italian culture. It's a wonderful, enjoyable thing to do because Italians don't eat till a little bit later, usually 8, 9 p.m. and onwards. So this is something for that in between. And this is, you can go to bars for this specifically. All right, our goal is not to eat at crappy places. This is the big one. So how do we make sure we're finding hopefully non-touristy places and avoiding the really terrible ones? Let me talk to you about terrible places. What are we avoiding? Big menus, like big menus or lengthy menus. Pictures on them in every language you can think of. They've got a table of demo food trying to entice you, which usually looks terrible. Or they have staff being like, come eat here. Good restaurants do not need to convince you to come there. Few examples, y'all. Saw this in Naples when I was there a month ago. This menu, person for like comparison. I walked by and I'm like, I got to take a picture of that. I got to show people this. This is a hard red flag, hard one. This is an example of one of the demo tables. And so like, I don't know why they think this is adding to the appeal, but just keep walking, keep walking. Green flags. So first of all, if you're sightseeing in Rome, get away from the Trevi Fountain, get away from the Colosseum, get out, go away, go blocks and blocks away where you're not in a tourist area. Look for menus that are smaller, that are focused, that are specific, like regionalized, localized dishes. Ideally, you know, in Italian, English is so common. It's not a downside to see it in English in my mind, or even another language. Just look at the other pieces of, like look for other flags, green or red. Then you can look at who's dining and when. If you've got a bunch of people, if the restaurant's open at like 6 and it's got a bunch of people sitting there eating, that's a tourist-centered restaurant because no one's eating dinner at 6 in Italy. Italians are not eating dinner at 6. You want a place that usually they'll open 7:30 or so. Most Italians, depending on where you're at in the country, 8:30 to 9:30, they'll get there, dine later into the evening. That's kind of what you're looking for. Also, just keep an eye on prices and compare. Tourist traps are going to have really oftentimes will have inflated prices. Quick example, this is a little osteria, so kind of a casual spot, but a really simplified menu. You can see here that it's actually promoting that it has, stands for Pici Freschi Fatti in Casa. It's fresh pasta made in-house, as well as their desserts Fatti in Casa. So like, you can just see the simplicity of the menu. Price points aren't too bad. I was in a little more expensive city. I forget where I took this, but yeah, so just to give you an idea of that. Another example, the menus do not have to be handwritten, but this was one I saw that it's like, oh, like they kind of changed it up pretty regularly. So, but you can see it's quite short on the whole. A few antipasti, which are starters, a few primi, which are pasta dishes, a few secondi, which are like meat or fish, and then a few desserts. Really simple, straightforward. So those are a few good signs. Now, this is what those bakeries and the kind of takeaway, like essentially like the Italian fast food, if you will, but it's a lot better and a lot healthier. So fornos are going to look kind of like this. They'll have breads and all sorts of things, but also like pizza. This one's in Rome by Campo dei Fiori. It's one of my faves. It has like this broccoli stracciatella pizza that I dream about. And then Tavola Caldas, they'll have all these different kinds of dishes. So you can go in and get stuff. Sometimes you can sit there and eat it, but usually it's for takeaway too. I am going to kind of skip this little tip site. The big thing I want to point out, you can read through this later, is that I'm going to get into tipping in a second. So not that. What's the one I want to talk about? I want to talk about service. Yeah, here we go. You need to ask for what you need. So a lot of times Americans, we're so used to service, people checking on us. In Italy, it's a lot more communal serving, and they're just going to leave you alone. So when you're ready for another glass of wine, when you want to if they haven't checked on you and you want to order a dessert, if you want the bill, feel free to just flag someone down, excuse me, and then you can ask for what you need. So don't be afraid to do that at all. But you can read through it. There's some fun Italian food rules or whatever. You can read through that later. Okay, I was making this presentation and I got to that slide and then I was like, I didn't talk about gelato. So I'm going to show you really quickly how to, or hopefully show you really quickly how to spot at least likely to be not great gelato and how to likely spot better gelato. So this is a picture of a gelateria and I want you to pay attention to the pistachio. Pistachio is pistachio in Italian. So this whole picture looks lovely. This bright, beautiful green pistachio color. Now let's look at my gelato. Pistachio is my favorite flavor. That is the pistachio gelato I got. You can see the color, hopefully you can see the color differences there, that the one in the bigger picture is really bright. Mine is quite dull. This signals to me that they have added things to the pistachio gelato to make it extra green. Also to this kind of huge mounding over the like gelato containers usually means they have to infuse air or anything else to like really help it keep its form so it doesn't melt. So ideally you're not wanting that. Now, so the pistachio flavor is a good like go-to to gauge it. Now, if you want to look at this legitimate gelateria and see if you can pick out the gelato or the pistachio gelato flavor just by color, I'll count down 3, 2, 1. It's that one. A lot different than our first picture. And you'll notice it's basically the same color as the one in my actual gelato cup there. So, and also too, you'll notice there's no overflowing gelato here. They're all kept in their containers where they're all kept at a consistent temperature. So those are just little things you can look for. Eat good gelato. We deserve to like always have good gelato. All right, quickly, tipping is not expected or mandatory, but if you're going to tip in cash, as Americans, you don't need to tip nearly as much as we do. I will say tipping is a little more common in tourist areas or services. So tour guides, private drivers, that sort of thing, or in like really tourist heavy areas like the Amalfi Coast or like Cinque Terre, you might find tipping is a little bit more common and appreciated. If you're in rural Umbria, it's definitely not nearly as common. The tourism sector has definitely affected that. But if you had a good experience, please feel free to tip. It's just know that it is never mandatory, always appreciated. Okay, tours and sightseeing. So I had the list of all the top sites to see. And I'm going to show you now a few different companies and my suggestions. Generally speaking, if you're wanting to look at tours, these are tour companies, Live Tours and Walks of Italy. They do a good job, generally speaking, all over Italy. I recommend using them if you want to book like a tour that's not with the official site. If you want to help, you do not have to do this, but if you want to help support me without it costing you anything, if you use the links on my website for Live or Walks of Italy, I'm an affiliate with them. So it helps support me. You don't need to do that, but but I would recommend them without being an affiliate too. They do a great job and I've used them before I was. But anyway, so they do a great job. Live Tours caps their groups at about 6 people. So a little bit higher cost, but a little bit lower group size. Walks of Italy, usually 12 to 15 people. So the cost is a little bit lower, but the group size is a little bit higher. Still does a great job. And they use great guides and all of that. So for general Italy travel. Now, specifically, some of my highlights. If you go to Rome, you might remember I mentioned the region of the neighborhood of Testaccio. This is Nassim, who runs a food tour in that neighborhood. I took his tour this last time I was there, and it was honestly, it just blew me away. It was fantastic. So he does a good job. There's also, you guys might be familiar with Local Aromas, the sisters that are from Rome. They do private food experiences. So those are great. If you're going to Florence and you have a chance to take the cooking class with Luca and Lorenzo of Love X Food, I love this. They have a place right outside of Florence, not too far away. And they take you out there and you have a full day of cooking. Venice, couple of ladies that I love. Lucrezia is a private tour guide, does all sorts of tours. Monica Cesarato is like the OG food tour, Cicchetti tour woman of Venice. So definitely look into working with them if you're going to Venice. And Reno, I don't know if Reno's still here. I can't see the chat. So Reno, if you're still on the call, he said he was going to try to join, but Reno is a dear friend and he operates Sorrento Easy Travel. If you're going to Sorrento, the Amalfi Coast, Reno can really operate much more, yes, with private transfers and tours and that sort of thing, but also he's from there. His family's been from the Amalfi Coast for generations. He knows everybody. He can help arrange boat tours, shared, private, road driving tours where you get to go see Positano and Amalfi, all of that, restaurants, etc. So he's a really great resource for that area. And yeah, so I got to hang out with him. It was really, really fun. Cultural etiquette, briefly, I know I've only got a few minutes left, so let me just touch on the important things. Something that's just notable, greetings are really important in Italy. And so I would recommend that like when you're going into even shops and that sort of thing, that if you learn a few Italian words and greetings, like use them, feel free to use them. That's really, really common. And then the other one I want to point out on this list is just dressing modestly in churches, covering your shoulders and your knees. That's even if it's not being enforced, that's a respectful thing to do. A few expectations, a lot of smoking, a lot of graffiti. Like sometimes people get surprised by that. But the water fountains, I didn't have a place to put this, but the water fountains in Rome or anywhere else you see is potable water. And so you can always refill your water bottle, or in Rome, they usually have this kind of feature here where there's a hole in the spout. So you could plug up the water down here and it works like a water fountain, pretty cool. But the water's potable in Italy. You can, unless, if you're somewhere rural, you might want to check, but generally speaking, I would totally trust it. Language basics, you're going to get this list. If you learned like nothing else, this will at least like help. You will find that you use this and this is helpful. So you'll get this list and can certainly practice and go over that. Critical issues, since I only have a couple minutes, let's touch on the most important stuff. This is a checklist. So when you get these slides, you can go through and just double check, make sure your passports are valid, make copies of them, make sure you've got your prescriptions for meds, keep meds always in carry-ons, get travel insurance. For money, check with, just make sure your cards aren't going to get freeze. So check with your banks. Travel notifications aren't usually necessary anymore, but something to definitely just make sure. The worst thing is if you get there and you're like, first time you try to use your card, it freezes up. And then briefly, money. I get this question a lot, how to get money? Do I need it? What do I do? So first to note, euro is the only accepted currency. So sometimes I get that question. If you haven't traveled, totally understand, but only euro, which we see here in the picture. Sometimes having cash is really helpful. Like I mentioned, public restrooms, tipping, city taxes, etc. Sometimes you can negotiate discounts if you have cash too. The best way to do it is, there's a few different ways. You can order it ahead of time or exchange currency. Those are not the ideal. Best way to do it is from bank-associated ATMs in Italy with your bank ATM card and just decline any conversion rate that they offer you. Few examples of actual bank ATMs. This is like just a self, or like what's the word, but like a bodega ATM. And then currency exchange. Those are going to give you worse rates. So especially if you're budget conscious, you can use anything in an emergency, but if you are trying to maximize your dollar, use the official bank ATMs. Again, just wanted to show you the currency, both the bills and then the coins here. I like to start with a couple €100. Worst cases, if you're not using it, because credit cards are really widely accepted, you can always use it up at the end of your trip, but it's really nice to have as a backup, also safety-wise. Credit cards, like I mentioned, widely accepted. Amex, usually sometimes can be hit or miss. And then one thing to note is no one should be walking away with your card. They bring you portable tap pay machines, or when you go to pay, your pay tap pay. Phones and eSIMs, using your service provider is the easiest, most expensive, but definitely the easiest. eSIM like Airalo can be convenient and a lot cheaper, and I've used it extensively. It has a few little quirks, but on the whole works really well. Wi-Fi is regularly available at cafes, restaurants, etc. But I wouldn't rely on Wi-Fi as like if I needed to use my phone. Electrical, just briefly, adapters, you're definitely going to need adapters. People get confused with adapters and converters. Type C or Type L, you would want both of those, or excuse me, just one of those would be fine. Converters actually convert the power that's delivered to your electrical device, whereas adapters just make sure you could plug it in. So usually American-made like hair curlers are not are not, cannot take the voltage that Italy delivers, so they'll burn out. But ideally, I would just buy a travel hair curler if you need that. Most like computers, cell phones, whatever, you don't need a converter. You just need the adapters. But check your appliances and you make sure you have what you need. Safety and scams, pickpockets are a thing. Definitely just stay aware. Especially in dense areas. Use bags that close, no flashy jewelry, trust your instincts, the normal stuff, but just be mindful. It is a thing. Don't get too stressed about it, but be aware. Few different scams just to be aware of. One of the ones I see most commonly in Rome is like the free bracelet. Like they'll try to give you, sorry, I went too fast, but the free bracelet scam where they try to give you something. Packing tips, I'm just going to send this over to you since we're almost at time here. I've got a packing list and a few packing tips. Basically, layers are your friend. I have some odds and ends. Biggest one, shoes. Bring the most comfortable shoes you can, and then bring a second most pair of comfortable shoes you can, and then bring moleskin because you're going to be walking a lot. So that's my suggestion. Great. And then some resources for you. I didn't have time to put, I didn't need to put them all in the slideshow. I have the free resource list at ItalyWithJenna.com, recommended tours, information, the travel products, all of that. So I thought it's easier to send you there. You don't have to do anything to access that. Just go to my site and there's a drop down for free resources, free resource list. Okay. That's all you need to do, but I've got a lot of stuff on there for that. Oh my gosh. I think I just barely did it. I just barely do it. Des.
You did it! Yay! 1 minute over. That's amazing.
I did it. Thanks everybody for hanging with me. Okay.
You have a ton of questions in the Q&A. So I have pulled out some of the questions that I think would benefit the most people. So I'm going to throw them at you, if that's okay with you, Jenna.
Please throw them at me. Yeah. And if anyone needs to drop off or please feel free to do that. We'll send you the follow-up. And thank you. If you are dropping off, thank you for joining. But yeah, let's roll into Q&A and see what we can answer.
Okay, so there's a couple questions generically regarding activities. Trish would like to know, what days are the popular museums in Rome closed?
The museums in Rome, typically, this is a good generality. Mondays are the days most places, if they're gonna close, will close Mondays. There are some random museums that choose Tuesdays instead. So check with the museums you want to go to, but Mondays would be the day generally you're going to want to avoid to plan on museums.
Okay, great. And Jenny would like to know, how long of a tour would you recommend for the Colosseum? She has seen express 1.5-hour tours, but also 3-hour tours.
Yeah, usually, Jenny, that's a great question. Usually the 3-hour tour should also include the Roman Forum, not just the Colosseum, unless it's including special access in the Colosseum. So if it's your first time, I would recommend doing a 3-hour tour as long as it includes both the Colosseum and the Roman Forum, so you get to see both in a more efficient way. Otherwise, if you're just doing the Colosseum, then an hour and a half is fine, or whatever the shorter one is.
All right. Next up, question from Casey. In Venice, from the airport, would we need to hire a water taxi ahead of time? And how far out would we need to arrange that?
That is a great question. So there are a few ways to get to your hotel. Water taxi is the easiest and most expensive. I would arrange it ahead of time just for convenient, that's the travel consultant in me. Your hotel most likely can help you with this. Otherwise, I mean, you don't need to usually do it too far out in advance, but even a couple weeks, a month in advance, get that arranged. I would have it planned just so you know you've got it set, if that helps. Yeah.
Okay.
I also actually I want to point out too, in Venice, there is a public shared water, like boat, bus, if you will, that's just the airport transfer. It's called the Ali Laguna, Laguna. And so I've taken this, we both of us probably taken this. It goes to certain spots around Venice too. And so you can buy tickets for that on the spot. And you won't get right to your hotel, but it's a lot cheaper than a private water taxi.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention real quick, if you don't mind, I didn't hear if you mentioned this, but there's also a land bus from the airport into Venice.
Yeah, there's I should need to make some content on this, but there's a few ways to get into Venice, and if you want the cheapest way, exactly what Des just said, it is the land bus. It takes you to, like, if you remember where I told you the last place buses or taxis can drop you in Venice. Then from there you'd have to, depending on where you're staying, get to your hotel. So yeah, just depends.
Okay. All right, I'm going to mangle this name, so bear with me. But Vincetta would like to know, do you have a preference between a hotel or something like a VRBO, particularly in the southern areas? I know you touched on that in your webinar, but I wanted to give you the
Ooh,
chance to
that's a
discuss.
that's a good question. I mean, personally, it again, I think it depends on a few factors. I first of all, I would prioritize location first. So if you've got a hotel in a better location than Airbnb or vice versa, I think that's more important, generally speaking. Again, if you're only there for a night or two, pick a hotel. If you're going to be there for a few nights, it's kind of nice to have, I think, an apartment Airbnb. I would vet well for them to make sure you're getting a quality place, good reviews, Superhost, all of that.
Mm.
Otherwise, if you want the convenience of a hotel, uh, sometimes that is the better pick, even for longer stays too. So it's just a variety of variables that. But if it's me, I could go either way. But I do like Airbnbs for longer stays in southern Italy too.
Okay. And oh, my apologies, I didn't note the person's name who wrote this, but they said, my husband and I are going to Naples from Rome and then to Capri.
Mhm.
Staying in Capri, can we visit Sorrento and Positano? Is it close or is it better to stay in Naples to visit Sorrento?
Okay, say that one more time.
Okay. She says, my husband and I, or they say, my husband and I are going to Naples from Rome and
Mhm.
then to Capri, and they're staying in Capri,
Mhm.
but they would like to visit Sorrento and Positano.
Mhm.
Is it close or is it better to stay in Naples to visit Sorrento?
Um, no, Capri to Sorrento, there's a very common ferry. So if you're staying in Capri, there's a regular ferry service to and from Sorrento. That's not a problem. Generally speaking, during high season, there's also ferry service that can get you to Positano. Um, Positano, keep in mind, does not have a dock or like a proper port like Sorrento does. So if the water's choppy, the ferry to Positano could be canceled most easily, right? So Sorrento is not a problem. Positano, I would just keep that plan flexible for getting there via ferry and make sure that you don't get stuck there unless you want to be stuck there. So,
Okay.
question.
Next, we have from Kelly, headed to Umbria, Tuscany, flying into Rome. They've
Mhm.
seen suggestions to take a train to Orvieto and get a rental there versus the airports, and they would like to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I've done that actually, exactly. And there's a Hertz right outside the train station of Orvieto. Make sure you're going during when they're open, because since it's such a small town, it closes like for lunch for like 3 hours. That's the only caveat. Otherwise, it works well. It's really convenient. You take the train out, and then when you're driving, you're basically on just really chill roads out of there. I haven't personally driven out of the Rome airport, but that would be my second option for you versus coming into Rome and driving out of Rome. I would not do that. So Orvieto is a great option. Another town you could look at, depending on where you're going, is Chiusi, Chiusi. Chiusi also has an Avis budget there. So that's pretty similarly, it's a little bit further than Orvieto, but another option you could look at depending on where you're going.
Cool. All right, moving on to some transportation related questions. Jared would like to know, generally the question is how many passengers can a taxi accommodate?
Mm.
So, like, can you order taxis that are bigger? How do you order a taxi?
Yeah, great question. Depending on what city you're in, this varies. General taxi is a 4-seater. There are plenty of taxis that are larger, 6-seaters. You can order there are apps that work in Italy, like FreeNow. I didn't mention this in the presentation, but if you go to the apps to download on my website, that's one of them. FreeNow is an app, and you can order larger vehicles if you need to. Um, yeah, that would, yeah. So then they can usually, I don't know the maximum 6. I think you'd have to probably make sure if you had more than that, you'd want to make sure you had transportation arranged.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can do that. I will say, I didn't mention this, but taxi stands are around major tourist places in all the main destinations. You don't hail a taxi, just to note. You actually go to a taxi stand, or you can use FreeNow as essentially like an Uber Lyft. Uber Black also works in Rome and Milan for sure. So you can, I always keep a couple of those apps on hand.
Okay, awesome, thanks. Next up is from Denise. Can you order tickets for the trains for more than one person?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you're buying tickets online for the train system and for any train, you can list how many people when you're going through it. Let's say you put 4 in. What they will ask for is everyone's like name information, but you can absolutely do that. Mhm.
Okay, easy. And then from Wendy, are you less likely to be affected by train strikes with Italo?
Possibly, yes. I don't want to say a lot of times people say book with Italo because they're not affected. That's not true. Italo is affected by the train strike happening this weekend. It depends on what organization is striking. So, all that to say, I think I would honestly, if it were me, I would only really care about whether it's Italo or Trenitalia with scheduling and pricing, and then pick the best option. If Italo is not affected by a train strike, and Trenitalia is, you'll get a refund from Trenitalia and you could book a train with Italo alternatively as an option, just to give you that too.
Okay, cool.
Great questions. These are great.
And then I know these are all such good
So great.
questions. It was
Yeah.
hard to pick the top ones, so I had to go with ones that I thought most people would benefit from. Karen had a great question. What happens if you book a train ahead of time, and then your flight is delayed? I'm guessing she means for as you're on your like arrival day.
Oh, such a great question. So you don't, for any of the trains getting you from the airport to like city center, if you're just doing like local transport, not like going from Rome to Florence that day, but Rome to Rome city center, that just book day, just buy them when you get there. If you're talking about we want to get a train ticket from, we're going to land in Rome, but we want to go to Florence that day, what I would recommend is booking a ticket. There are different classes of tickets on Trenitalia and Italo that would allow you to change your ticket up until departure time. So that way, if you know your plane's delayed or something happens, just change to, or even like book a later train than you think. And then if you get to the get in earlier, you can change it to an earlier one, but book that level of ticket so that you have some flexibility. That'd be my suggestion.
Okay, great. Now a couple of flying related questions. Dominique would like to know how long will it take to go through customs and passport control, particularly flying into Milan?
Yeah, it's going to vary. I would always allow that my default is give yourself like a 3 hour window before anything. So just if you're landing at 8, I feel good. You're going to get to your hotel by 11. That's not going to be an issue if you're staying in Milan. So that would be my like default. It should be way faster than that on the whole. And keep in mind too, if you are transferring in Schengen first, let's say you fly into Frankfurt, you'll go through immigration there and customs there. And then it's basically acts like a domestic flight into Italy. So you won't go through it again. So that's something to also keep in mind.
Great, that is so helpful. I know that that is a big question, especially for first-time travelers. It's so hard to know what to expect.
It absolutely.
Yeah. So Casey would like to know if we're traveling with a suitcase, is it best to get an upgraded ticket? I don't quite have the context there, but I would guess it would have to do with maybe checking a bag or making sure there's
Oh,
room for a carry-on.
if you have, so should I buy an upgraded plane ticket? Is that what we're thinking?
That was my interpretation.
Train ticket?
I read the question verbatim.
Well, so I'll answer both. Well, the flight, usually you have an included check bag. So if you don't and you want one, add it on. That's of course worthwhile, or upgrade. Now, you might be talking about train upgrades. And in that case, because I get that question a lot too, should I upgrade to a higher business class or executive class with a bigger bag? Honestly, if you have the budget for it, it's nice because it's a little bit more space, usually a little bit quieter. So I would, if it's not going to break the bank for you, it'll feel a little smoother, especially if you're traveling in high season. That'd be my suggestion.
Great. And then we had a couple questions. I'm not going to go to the specific questions, but generally a couple questions about do you recommend using a travel agency for first timers and suggestions on how to find a good travel insurance?
Yeah, great question. Travel agents, if you have a good travel agent, can be really beneficial. I think it can be a helpful element. I think the pros are like they can really help you organize your trip and kind of an extra set of eyes to make sure everything's going to go smoothly. They're a contact point if anything goes awry. That can be really helpful. The downside is if you have someone that doesn't know Italy, I would really search out someone that knows Italy if you're going to Italy. That can make a big difference. And make sure to do a little price checking. I did have anecdotally, I had someone that I saw what their travel agent suggested to them, and the price points to me were much higher than they needed to be, even for adding in some commission or something like that. So I would just kind of check with what are they offering you? Is that price
Mhm.
comparable? Make sure they know Italy and routing. I actually work with a lot of clients that use travel agents. So a lot of my consulting clients are using travel agents. So if you want to do even a short call, you don't have to. This isn't like, I'm not trying to upsell, but I'm saying if you want to like just talk through the logistics of your trip and then use your travel agent to make sure you're booking everything, it's kind of can be a nice combination. But otherwise, yes, travel agent can be helpful, not always necessary, in my opinion, if you're doing the research, you like planning and all of that. What was the second part of that question?
It was about travel insurance, like how to find a good travel insurance company.
Yeah, there are a variety of like Travel Guard and Travel Insured and Alliance people. Like there's some big ones. Look at the policies, how to find. I don't know, Des, I don't know. Feel free if you have additional insight on this, because I know you've been in travel a lot too, or been traveling a lot.
Mhm.
But there's I would look at what the policy covers most importantly and look at reviews for the travel insurance company. But yeah, anything else to add from your point of view?
I don't have anything to add. I always get travel insurance for sure. Um, Making sure to book within 14 days, I believe it is, of your first reservation anywhere for your trip is important if you want pre-existing conditions covered. But otherwise, I think it kind of just depends on whatever works for you and your trip, price-wise and coverage-wise.
Right. You
So
can,
there's
yeah,
no
that's a
way
good
to
point.
there's no way to get out of the research for that one, I don't think.
Right, right. There's a lot of options out there. And just I would go with there's a lot of reputable companies. I would go with one that's offering coverage. You can usually do like sometimes there's like compare contrast options where you can look at what different policies are offering. But yeah, make sure it covers what you want to, depending on what kind of coverage. And then medical, I always make sure I do a medical coverage too, just in case something were to happen as well while I'm
Yeah,
abroad. So
yeah. I know we're at time, but there's one more question that I would like you to answer live if you can, because I think it's important. How are restaurants when it comes to dietary requirements?
great question. I know I didn't like this whole thing could have been like I 20 hours, I feel like. But to quickly answer that, on the whole, most restaurants can accommodate very well gluten-free, dairy-free isn't usually an issue. If you have allergies, just let them know. On the whole, restaurants are very up and aware of those things. So I would make sure you know how to communicate your exact allergies and the severity, like even just get it in Google Translate or whatever, just to make sure if it's a severe allergy, you're communicating exactly what you can and cannot have. But on the whole, restaurants are very good. If you have really extreme allergies, you might need to seek out restaurants in advance that are like really specific for those accommodations. But if you're just like, I can't have gluten, that's really easy. Or I can't have, fish or, seafood. So
Yeah. Yeah, in my experience, they're very well marked on the menu. So it's extremely helpful. A ton of questions came in after you started the Q&A. I could not keep up even with reading them. A few people posted questions in the webinar chat. If you guys posted in the webinar chat, if you can throw it in the Q&A, it helps us stay organized after the fact. But Jenna, I believe we can still see the chat afterwards. Is that right?
yes, the chat will
Okay.
save, so we'll still see the chat. And yeah, and if there's I'm sure there's other questions that, yeah, anything else we should definitely touch.
Well, there's probably like 50 other questions that we did not get to. Okay, 30. So will you have an opportunity after this webinar to answer these questions that we weren't able to get to?
That's a good, well, that's a good question. Yeah. Why don't I figure out a way to do that? Sure. All these questions that we didn't get answered, maybe I'd do a recording or do something. Maybe
I
I'll,
think that,
should we do that?
yeah,
Recording?
I think we should because you have so many
Okay.
really, really good questions. Some are kind of specific
Yeah.
that you might want to address with the individual people, but some I think are general enough where they would help everybody. We're just short on time.
Yeah. Well, for I love that idea. Why don't, since there are so many, why don't what I'll do is try to figure out a way to, I don't know if I'll be able to do it before I send out, my hope is to send out the recording and everything by like Monday or Tuesday. If I can do a recording by then, please, please know I'll send out the follow-up. Otherwise, I'd like to avoid sending out 2 emails if I don't have to. Otherwise, I'll figure out a way to send it out as a second email, worst case scenario, just so everyone gets notified. Because even if I post it on TikTok, not everybody sees it because the algorithm or like anywhere else. Like I want to make sure if you're here and you registered, you get to see the answers. So worst case is you'll get 2 emails from me. How about that with recorded answers?
I don't think anybody would mind getting
Okay.
2 emails if it's going to answer all their questions and a bunch they might not have even thought of until somebody else did and posted it in the Q&A.
I love it. Well, and maybe too, yeah, like if anything else is coming up in your mind right now, feel free to throw it in before we go. I'll leave the webinar open for a few minutes after we shut down here in a second. So if you want to keep adding a few questions, we'll do recording. I'll throw them in there. And yeah, would love to make sure we can get through more of them as well, but also want to respect everybody's time. So yeah,
Well, yeah, I was going to say, while people are throwing their questions in, let me ask you, when are you going back to Italy next?
Oh, Des, that's a great question. I might be going back. I was looking at either January or March. It's gotta be soon. Yeah, it's gotta be soon. Also, too, I did open the chat now, and as people are, I think, probably logging off, I just want to say thank you to everyone too, as you're leaving, as whatnot. We might keep chatting here for a minute or two, but thank you so much, everyone, if you're leaving right now. Really appreciate. Oh, I had a screen for this. Hang on. Look, I had my thank you screen, everybody. So grazie mille. Thank you guys very much. Please keep throwing questions in the chat. We'll keep chit chatting for a minute, but really appreciate it. Hope it was helpful. Really was hope. I know we covered so much. Like,
That was a ton of information. I just saw one question pop up in the chat, and I think that
yeah.
this is good information for everybody. How do they schedule a call with you on some specifics?
Oh, fantastic. Easy. Go to my website on the screen here, italywithjenna.com. There's a book a call tab, really slick. I have a 25-minute call that we'll make sure we cover what you need to if you just want to chit chat about stuff. So book that, $65 for that call. And also too, I'll include some resources for you as well. So that's the easiest way if you just want to do kind of a quick little, hey, let's just double check some things. I also offer, if you don't know this, I also offer longer consulting calls. I have a 50-minute call that's more comprehensive, and I'll do customized like recommendations for you, as well as can do some itinerary finessing. I do also do any research or like special requests kind of stuff for those calls as well. But yeah, so would love to chat with you guys more one-on-one. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. So thanks for asking that.
We've seen how much you can pack into an hour or a half hour. So that is amazing.
I apologize for talking fast. I know I do, but at the very least you can rewatch the recording, you get the slides, you can go through it again. But I figured worst case is you've got the information and at least have heard a good chunk of it, and then my hope is like it's just helpful for making people's trips a little bit smoother in the planning process and all of that. So and also as a reminder, this was a big thank you for any of you. If you follow me on TikTok, this was a big thank you. But also if you don't follow me on TikTok, also a thank you to you for being a part of this community and being here and supporting. This is like, I love doing this stuff. And the fact that I get to do it is super cool. So thanks so
It,
much, everybody. But
yeah, this was so informative. You know, I've been to Italy a bunch of times, and even I found new information in there where I was like, oh, I'm gonna put that in my back pocket.
man,
It's
it's
good to
just
know.
yeah, and it's why like besides loving to be there, every time I'm there, I learn new things as well. And so I've just got a few more years on it than some other people. So that's the benefit. But yeah, this is great.
Well,
Okay.
thanks for letting us benefit from all of your knowledge.
Thank you. And I want to say, Des, thank you. For those of you still here, I'm sending a big thank you to all of you. Thank you to Des. Thank you so much for being a moderator and being a part of this.
Yeah, thanks
Very
for including me.
appreciated.
I really
No.
enjoyed this. And like I said, I learned a lot too, and I thought I knew everything.
Man, it's fun too. The questions that come in like a lot of times they're really informative for me too. It's like if I don't know something, it's like, well, then we fill in that little gap. But yeah, I think I saw we have quite a few more that came. Oh, this is great. We'll have to record a fun like,
Yes.
or we'll do something.
We'll
So
have to do like a fast round for your TikTok of like some of the best questions because this Q&A was on fire. Like people had great questions.
fantastic.
Like a lightning round.
Yeah, that's maybe sometime we could just, yeah, I'd love to do more of that kind of stuff. That would be super, super fun.
Definitely.
That's
Well, I
great.
think last call for the Q&A if you guys want to throw anything else in there.
And this should save, we should get all the questions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we can, even if we're not answering them live, we can see all the questions after the fact.
fantastic.
Listen to me, I'm just now part of the team.
You are.
And I can see all the questions after the fact.
Yeah, this is great. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you guys. Yeah, well, so I think I don't see any more trickling in, at least on my end. So I think maybe
Me neither.
we've got it. Fantastic. Well, wonderful. Well, I will be in touch with everybody about via email with the recording, the information, the PS Q&A, and we will go from there. So wonderful. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, safe travels to everybody, and look forward to hopefully future fun things we get to talk about, more Italy stuff. So great. Awesome. Well, great. Well, Des, should we call this?
I think it's time to call it.
Let's do
But
it. All right,
this
guys.
was awesome. Thanks for having me, Jenna.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Des. And I'll see you soon, and we'll
Yep.
all talk soon. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll stop.
Bye, everyone.